What makes a great photo? Insane editing? The fact that it's taken at sunset? Amazing rolling landscapes? Does it show us emotion? Although these things can help, they pale in comparison to composition in your photos. Now, I don't think any photographer shows us this better than Chris Burkard. If you just look at his Instagram grid, all his photos are barely touched and they look amazing. Why is that? The answer? Pretty much, it's just downright incredible composition. Hello and welcome back to Triple Tech, and today we are going to master the art of composition. So today we're going to be looking at the king of all composition guidelines, and that is the rule of thirds. Now there are many other rules of composition that you can use, but the rule of thirds is pretty much the be all and end all, and you're not going to really need anything else. Once you know this, you pretty much know everything you're going to need, and from there on out, it's just about being creative. Now the first thing to realise is that the rule of thirds, before I even go into the rule of thirds, is to know that this is not a rule. Although it's called the rule of thirds, it shouldn't really be called that. You really need to look at it as a guideline, because, you know, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it is art, and no matter how you compose your photos, they are you and your artwork that you're putting out there. So don't worry, there is no right and wrong way to do it, no matter what anyone would say. Just remember that. Now then, let's get into it. What is the rule of thirds? So essentially, it's this. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Not really much else to say. Of course, I am joking. So what does this actually mean? Now, it's impossible for me to explain these four sets of lines without a photo beneath them to let me explain. Okay, so first let's explain the concept of these lines in the context of a landscape. Let's start with those horizontal lines. What do they mean? Well, basically, in the context of a landscape, these are your horizon lines. One, they help you get your horizon straight, because really any landscape should have a flat or level horizon. So these guidelines can help you get that spot on, so you have some nice straight lines throughout your screen or your display, just to make sure you nail that levelness. Now these lines are also known as horizon lines, so therefore you can either place your horizon on the top line or the bottom line. Now it doesn't matter which one you put it on, but it does matter in the context of your photo. For example, if there is a lot of interest in the sky, say at sunset, and you got some nice coloured clouds, something like that, then you really want to put your horizon line on the bottom line, and therefore leaving more space above that horizon for some clouds. And the same thing goes for the bottom part of your image. If you have a lot of interest in the bottom part of your image below your horizon line, say if you've got some nice leading lines through mountains going up to the horizon, you know, some lakes and stuff like that up to the horizon, then you might want to have that horizon line on the top line of your rule of thirds. Therefore, you're leaving more space below to see that lovely rolling landscape. In most good landscape shots, you generally have a point of interest, or a point that those leading lines or whatever lead up to, and it's really a nice point of interest. For example, you can have a windmill. That's quite a common one. That's a center object that really draws your eyes in, and that is known as your point of interest. Now generally, your point of interest will want to face towards the middle of your photo. For example, if you had a windmill, then you would have your windmill facing to the center of your photo, and you'd place that windmill on either the left or the right on the opposite side to which it's facing. So example, if it's on this side and it's facing that way, you'd want it on this side. If it's facing that way, you'd want it on this side, basically. Simple as that. So now let's look at a couple of examples of my pictures. So this is a picture taken in Wales in the UK. As you can see, the bottom part of the image, the horizon, is in the bottom third of the image, because I think that the sky has a lot more interest than this pretty boring beach. And these birds I've placed are in a pretty bright area of the sky just to make them pop. They're not necessarily on that opposite third. Remember, this is just a guideline. This is just me already breaking that rule, but it still looks like a good photo. It's not the be-all and end-all, but, you know, it's very important to know these rules. So this is a good example of having a point of interest. Now for me, my point of interest and the bit I want to look at is below the horizon. So therefore I've got the horizon placed on the top line, and my point of interest is occupying that right third, because the point of interest for me is on the bow of that ship, the person looking off to the horizon, looking in to the photo, not looking out the photo. Although this isn't really a landscape shot, it's still an action shot and still composed in the same rules. We haven't got much of a horizon here, so we're not really thinking about that. So this is again throwing away that horizon rule part of the image because, well, in this case we don't really have a horizon. But we do have a point of interest. Again, it's the skier doing a jump, and we've placed that in the left third of the image, looking again to the right, into the image. Now I found an image here which I haven't really done much of the rule of thirds. All I have done with the rule of thirds is helping me position myself straight in the middle of the lens, and therefore it's given me quite a nice sort of centered looking image. Although it's not directly on the rule of thirds, the horizon is on the bottom half because I think the sky has quite a bit of interest to it, and also it would cut me off as well. Now remember, the rule of thirds is all about balance. The thirds are equally placed across the image, and it's designed to balance your image and give it a pleasing look to the eye. So when you've got enough experience, you can throw away the rule of thirds, and you can rotate the rule of thirds, stuff like that. So when you've got enough experience, you can do things like rotate the rule of thirds around diagonally, and you can place your subjects at balance points diagonally through your image. For example, here's one of a landscape I've done on a skiing holiday. It has basically no resemblance to a rule of thirds positioned image at all. I mean, it doesn't really make much sense, does it? But if you do rotate that image, you can see I have balanced it out slightly within the rule of thirds. It's just a slightly different way of doing it. So you can just get creative. Remember, as I said at the beginning, it's art. You can do what you want. Here's a tip to up your selfie game as well. Apply the rule of thirds to your selfies. It really does help. Now we're going to start to move into the portrait territory of the rule of thirds, which really is basically the same thing. And you can probably guess exactly where we're going to go with portraits. And, you know, it's very simple. But first, let's look at one more example from the landscape portion. Although it's not really landscape, when we're moving into the portrait zone. But as you can see, it's another sort of action shot in the winter. Got some nice snow flying around, really. And it's just, again, another self-portrait of me jumping off the top of a stack of... it's actually a bonfire, just covered in snow, but jumping off of it, it's quite a nice action shot, but as you can see, it's composed that I'm in that top right third. But what I haven't done is I'm not looking into the image. Again, this is a nice image, but I'm not looking into it. Again, it's another example which I'm not following it because it's only a guideline, not a rule. Remember, it's not a rule, it's a guideline. Now, me personally, I'm not much of a portrait photographer, so I haven't got really many portrait shots to show you. But I'll show you one here. This is again from a skiing holiday. And the idea, the difference here with portrait photography is really in that horizon line. You are always going to have your subject facing in to the picture, like the same with your point of interest or a landscape. But the horizon line is also known as your eye line when it comes to portrait photography. If you place the eyes along that top line, it's basically another compositional technique to make your image nice and balanced. Now I'd like to show some examples from the king of composition himself, Chris Burkard, who I mentioned at the beginning of the video, who I really admire for his composition because his pictures are not edited. They're barely edited at all. They are edited slightly, but very, very, very rarely. So insane editing really isn't the be-all and end-all of amazing photos. It's just amazingly composed. Yes, he is in lovely, incredible environments, incredible landscapes, but they're composed perfectly. So you can find incredible examples of the rule of thirds in action throughout the internet. Just go and have a look. You'll learn yourself, and then you've got to go out and do it. Just at the end of the day, you've just got to go out and do it. And then you'll get better at it over time, and you'll learn what looks good and what doesn't, and you'll master the art of balance in your photos, and you'll master the art of the rule of thirds and composition. So really, what else is there to say? I'm not sure. If you like the video, do hit the like button below and subscribe, it really helps. And if you have any questions at all, ask them in the comment section below. Have a little creative discussion. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.